Book Your Booth. I'm Joe Osborne and this is the Crypt Studio. This is our live room. It's an amazing sounding room. Apologies for the cupboard being a little bit of a state, but I guess that's what a working studio is like. Another thing that sets us apart is our gold standard Dolby Atmos setup, which was installed by the Dolby team. One of the kind of prized pieces of the studio. Really, it's the opportunity for expression and the fun and the creativity of it. In here we've got a nice little booth. In this room we also tend to do a bit of fun, immersive stuff from time to time, which is cool. Here you can find a load of information about the Crypt and you can book us and chat to us through Book Your Booth. So welcome to the control room. This is the hub of where everything takes place. And I think my favourite thing about the control room genuinely is how much natural light we have. The fact that you're looking over trees and it's a really calming oasis in the heart of London, and something that control rooms and studios generally don't have a lot of natural light, and it really helps foster a kind of feeling of calm, and it's a space that people love to be in, and I love working in it. I'm an engineer here. It's a super small team. It's mainly me and my colleague David who run everything session-wise. And because we're a little independent studio, that also means we're the ones doing emails, we're the ones communicating with bands, we're the ones talking to labels, we're the ones putting events on here. But day-to-day engineering. In terms of equipment, we've got a really nice, kind of rare to find AMEC Big with Rupert Neve designed preamps. This one actually belonged to a band called Basement Jacks back in the 90s, 2000s, and ended up in here, and thank God it did, because it's a really cool desk. But we also track a lot on our outboard pre's, so the Focusrites, which are the kind of workhorses, the DAV Electronics, and a few nice little bits here like this Apogee Track 2 digital pre, which is lovely on pop vocals or room mics, anything that you want really kind of like crisp and airy and with a lot of transient detail. And then for a different colour, 6176 tube pre and compressor, which is just so nice on double bass, on saxophone. So the stuff that inspired me to get into music, really it's the opportunity for expression and the fun and the creativity of it, and the fact that you can do things subversive or different or interesting in a way that's entertaining and enjoyable and relatable and challenging in a way that is important. On more old school, warm vocals where you can just drive it a little bit and get a little bit of that nice analog distortion in there. It's another lovely thing we use. We've got some classics, the 1176, DBX units and distressors, and it's a really lovely control room to work in. We play around with the tape machine a little bit. We rarely record onto it, but we kind of run things through it just for some of that classic tape compression and warmth, and it can be a fun little toy to use in the control room. And so are some of our synths that we just have lying around. It's a really nice room to write in, and I think it's an underrated thing that studios sometimes don't think about, how important it is for artists to come in and have somewhere comfortable to write and hang out and try things and be creative, because after all, that's why everyone wants to be in music and why people enjoy being in these kind of environments with various instruments at the tip of their fingers. I think another thing that sets us apart is our gold standard Dolby Atmos setup, which was installed by the Dolby team about 5 years ago probably now, with some lovely Adam monitoring. It's a really amazing space. We've got an absolutely huge sub which lives under this side table, and as you can imagine, it sounds incredibly powerful in like a beautifully treated control room when you're working in Atmos. with a sub of that size, with a really perfect setup. It's a really in demand and desired Atmos space, which is used a lot for mixing, for some like Atmos finishing projects, and also for playback and for people to come in, you know, label people, artists, to hear back the stuff that's been worked on. Everything you do in the room sounds amazing, and we like to think that we really know our stuff in the control room and with mics and placement and everything like that, and our instruments are lovely, so you know, everything's kind of taken care of, so you can just enjoy it. And we really encourage that kind of DIY creative approach to everything, and to get away from the idea of the industry and things that feel big and scary and not really that relevant to making stuff sound good. So I think that's the thing I appreciate most about here. It's an amazing space. It's so unique in the way that everything sounds great, the gear is great, but the vibe is very chill. We've done an awful lot of Atmos stuff and a lot of immersive mixing generally over the years, and hosted even immersive mixing workshops here a couple years ago, so it's something that I suppose is another trick up our sleeve, another thing that we can offer, and something that is fun and brings variety, I guess, to the studio as well. So yeah, besides the regular tracking, besides the writing that we do in this room, we also tend to do a bit of fun immersive stuff from time to time, which is cool. Let's go and see some more of the studio. In here we've got a nice little booth, which is used for a lot of things. Of course, it's a space where a lot of vocals get done, but also it's a space where we stick a lot of bass amps, guitar amps. The owner of the studio, actually, Ricky, is a bass player himself, so we've got a lot of like big bass cabs knocking around, and this tends to be the place where they go. We've even had some strings in here. We've had a string duet in here, which has sounded really lovely, actually. We've even squeezed the drums in here from time to time. You want to have the live room as an open space for other stuff, some nice room mics out for some strings perhaps, or for some guitars with huge stacks of amps and whatnot. So this can be a really versatile space. It's a really nice space to be in, and you've got a really great line of sight through to the rest of the studio, which is also great.
Nice. Let's check it out.
And behind this curtain as well, we have a little kitchen, which is always handy, you know, for whenever someone needs a drink, for whenever someone needs a little snack or some food. Yeah, it's super handy having it on site. A lot of cooking gets done in here, and even a lot of cocktails and stuff gets made from time to time. So yeah, it's a really handy little thing to have in the booth as well. And actually, sometimes guitar amps get stuck in there for a really like bright, vibrant, bouncy sound. Right now we're living in an era where space is really important for performance, for recording, for everything in the arts. You know, we have more and more gigs in alternative venues and interesting spaces. We have more and more art installations that use space and dialogue with the space they're in. Musically, we have a lot more music that creatively is using space in a very intentional way, and equipment in a very intentional way, where with the same artist, the same song, the same production can have intentional phone voice memos and huge concert hall recordings all jumbled up in the same music. And it's a weapon, it's like an instrument to use space, which is becoming more and more cool and trendy and considered and thought through, and is really fun. And yeah, so this is our live room. It's an amazing sounding room. Honestly, I think like I've never had the pleasure of working somewhere with a room that is just so complementary to everything that we do. You know, the high ceilings, the wooden floors, the fact we're in an old church, big thick stone walls. It's just like a beautiful, fairly lively room, but definitely controlled. It sounds amazing with drums, sounds amazing on strings. We've done a lot of string stuff. with string heavy pop bands like Clean Bandit, for instance. They've done loads and loads and loads of string stuff here, and string quartets. I recently did something with an old engineer from Air, which is obviously the string place in London, and they absolutely loved it here and came back, which was lovely, and lovely to learn some of those techniques as well. But yeah, it's an amazing room for drums, especially with this kit, which is a really lovely 1960s Ludwig, which is just on about everything in here, and you can really hear, it's funny when things come out and you can just tell instantly those drums were recorded at the Crypt. So I think the coolest thing about this Crypt is, for me personally, how homey and cozy it feels. I think a barrier for a lot of emerging artists in terms of studio environments, especially studios that have been around as long as here, there can be a kind of unapproachable atmosphere, or there can be, it feels very serious and it feels very technical, and not a place for fun and play. And I think what's amazing about this Crypt and this space is that it gets back to the point of all this, you know, to be creative, to have fun, to enjoy yourself. It's also a room full of kind of keyboard curiosities. Ricky, the owner here, has a penchant for picking up fun instruments. I guess we'll start with the pianos. We've got a really lovely old Broadwood Grand, which is super soft. It's well over 100 years old. It's really unlike the kind of Yamahas or even, you know, the Steinways that you get around a lot of studios in London. It's just so much softer, and has a lot of character. And it's incredibly different to this, which is the Scheidmeier Upright, which is so bright, it's almost like a harpsichord, but then also has this really amazing felt on it as well. Which is really lovely. I used it recently in recording pop stars, kind of like Christmas singles, and that was the ideal sound for that kind of warm fireplace. We really work with anyone and everyone. I think accessibility is something that really needs to be improved upon within studios. Obviously price points, but also just in terms of feeling like you belong there and like this is somewhere you can be. You know, often we're working with like a major label artist the same week as we're working with some local kids, or you know, someone who's over on tour and has an afternoon to squeeze in and a bit of studio time for writing or for whatever it might be. We've got a really amazing Rhodes, which very recently got resurfaced, and I've never heard a Rhodes with such defined bright top end. It's really lovely. And a little pianette as well, which is often a great accompaniment with the Rhodes. We normally have another Wurlitzer up here, that's being serviced as we speak, but we've got this, which is an extremely rare, unusual, let me just plug it in, extremely rare, unusual butterfly Wurlitzer, which due to its casing has a very different tone to it. It's a room that is amazing for live bands, really. This room is just, it really sings when you've got drums here playing live. We've got a couple guitarists or bassists with their amps run through to booths in the kitchen and wherever else, and someone's on the piano on the grand. You get a nice amount of separation in here with the baffles and everything, but you also get a really nice cohesive sound of a band in a room, you know, as it kind of should be. But we also do a fair amount of like classical and like contemporary classical stuff. string sessions, again, it's a beautiful room for a string quartet. We've had some choirs in. I quite recently recorded some of the performers from the West End and The Lion King. It's got a lot of attitude for something that looks as like beautiful as it does. Ignore the snare rattle, but it's a really special instrument, something that like rarely people who come in the studio have ever seen before, and it tends to end up on every record because people are so tempted to sit behind it and mess around with it, and it's just amazingly powerful. It's got a line in as well, which is really handy in a busy session, to just have that kind of control over it. But I mean, I guess its lovely wings give it the butterfly name, and is really what it's all about, sticking a stereo pair on them and getting that nice Wurlitzer of vibrato, like warbling around. It's really lovely. There's nothing really we don't do. We do like hip hop and rap and grime and drill and things like that. The booth gets used a lot for that. We've had some big names in those kind of spaces come in here. Digger D comes in here a fair bit. We've had, a lot of dub, and General Levy, someone who's popped in here a bit. But a lot of band stuff. And then we've got a Hammond with a Leslie, which of course is just classic. And can really blow your head off in this room. I guess maybe being a church space, it's like specifically resonant, and it just really suits the room as well. And we've got some other little curiosities, like this little harmonium, a zither that is knocking around somewhere. I think the amazing thing when you work with big artists, impressive musicians, there's kind of two things that really stand out to me. Firstly, and this is something that I think everyone can learn, when you have the opportunity to be in a studio with nice gear, the pre-production is so important, to be well rehearsed, to feel confident and comfortable in your music, so that when you come in the room, this is time for play. Advice for artists, young artists and new artists who want to record: I think the pre-production is important. I think if you can make your band sound great in a rehearsal room, just over the weeks and months, and it's hard work and it's discipline, but it means that studio time can then be a lot more affordable and the whole process can be a lot smoother. It's one of the kind of prized pieces of the studio. One of my colleagues, it was kind of left to him by maybe his godfather or something, who happened to be a Scandinavian jazz vibraphone player, and it's just so nice. It's the most expensive tuning fork we've got in the studio, and it's also particularly lovely because it's this old Deegan vibroharp is specifically a studio vibroharp, and often you get kind of live vibraphones in studios which are louder but a little less nuanced and a little less warm, and it's beautiful. It's another thing that ends up on absolutely everyone's record somewhere. As you can see, we've got some little percussion bits that were used recently on an album of some Brazilian artists, some friends of mine, that recorded over a couple of days, which was so much fun. And seeing Brazilian percussionists knocking all this stuff around is just unreal. Space is important. I think generally the quality of music, not the creativity, but not the writing, but the sound of music has got an awful lot worse over the last couple of decades, maybe even more so. And if your music sounds like it's recorded well in a good place, it stands out so much more than it probably would have done 20-30 years ago. That's not to say that like home setups and the accessibility of recording nowadays isn't wonderful, but I think really what it's great for is the writing process and the creative process at the beginning and the in-the-box production. What it isn't good for is giving your creativity the respect it deserves. You know, this is the thing you care about more than anything in the world. This is the stuff you spend all your time doing. So with that care in mind, I think it's absolutely foolish not to then invest in the thing that you're putting all your time into and get into a studio. You'll notice the difference in the sound, you'll notice the difference in how you perform, you'll notice the difference in how much you enjoy it. It's really special. And then another thing that kind of makes the studio stand out a little bit is for bassists, it's like a haven. A Rickenbacker, I think it's like 1972 or something. Again, the boss is a bassist, so we've got all his old basses. We've got a nice jazz bass here, we've got a P bass, we've got a violin bass which is hanging on the wall over there at the moment, which is really cute. And that's kind of a fun extra thing that I think bassists are used to being forgotten a little bit in the studio, and guitarists preferred, so bassist is the place to come if you feel important. And then I guess we can go through a few mics. We've got, apologies for the cupboard being a little bit of a state, but I guess that's what a working studio is like. This is one of my favourite mics we've got in the studio, our Geffel UM70, the company run by George Neumann of Neumann fame. When he was persecuted, I believe a persecuted Jewish man in Berlin, he went with some of the best of his team to a town called Geffel and started a new small production line out there. So the Microtech Geffel UM70, capsule wise, it's classic Neumann. It's a beautiful condenser. That's something we use on vocals all the time. Obviously we then do have all that classic Neumann stuff too. We've got 87, got a lot of classic TLM stuff, 103s, 170s, 193s. You know, like you get a really different sound when you're recording with, you know, huge, like our Sony C38B room mics, which are lovely. They sound huge and so shimmering and just spacious when you've got them high up and you play with that space. And that's completely different to, you know, shoving a drum kit in the booth and getting everything really tight and almost like 8080. We've got our classic pair of Coles, which obviously are used constantly and are absolutely lovely. There's a lot of classic stuff going on here. And then kind of some quirky things too. We've got some ball and biscuit mics, which are really fun. I use them as like mono rooms for drums. They're so like washy and like bright and just really fun and trashy. I quite like using this funny little M260 Bear Dynamic Ribbon. It's like quite a quirky mic that I chuck on, again often as like a room mic or something funny like that. The Coles or STC 4037, so number wise one before the classic 4038, which is a really cool crush mic, and I don't know, another thing that I use kind of for fun. So we offer loads of stuff here, like really everything. Generally it's day-to-day a classic tracking, you know, recording studio, but we post-production, we do sound design, we do composition, we do VOs, we do podcasting, we do location sound. We can come to you. We've recorded big bands and artists. My boss was recording Ed Sheeran, I think, last week, doing a live session down the Regent's Canal. We do mixing. You know, we mix everything from records to dialogue to very sound design heavy stuff. In here quite a lot. And I guess this is another fun, nice thing. Steve Albini's favourite, the M380 Bear Dynamic kick mic, which is used all the time, along with stuff like the D12 and 112, I guess. Yeah, we've got loads of fun stuff in here. We can host your album release. We can do a little live gig for you, and we can record that, because maybe the tension and what's at stake when you're playing live gets something out of you. So we'll put the event on, we'll throw some mics up, we'll do it that way. Some other curiosities, like fun little bits and pieces that get picked up. And I think it's a nice thing about this studio, like we really encourage people to just play around with things. You know, we're so used to the room and love it so much that you know, we can get a great drum sound off 10-12 mics and then play around with a few extras, and something always surprises me, which is really cool. Yeah, we do everything, you know, and we're super happy to help with whatever project you need, because it's all exciting and fun, and we can be creative, and for people who are curious about sound like us, it's an enjoyable thing. So yeah, you can find a load of information about the Crypt, and you can book us and chat to us through Book Your Booth. So yeah, come say hello, book a session, drop in to chat. Yeah, it'd be lovely to have you.